So after over 30 seasons and over 640 episodes, the Arrowverse has officially come to an end after the Flash Season 9 finale aired last week. The main heroes of these shows are generally beloved, but a lot of the side characters are, justified or not, hated by many fans. Myself included, I have to be honest. Especially in the later seasons of these shows, as the roster of series regulars generally increased, we typically saw more episodes centred around these side characters who didn't always have the best storylines to offer. But this video is not about those side characters I didn't like, and let's be honest, without even knowing me, you can probably guess which characters I didn't like. No, this video is about those side characters in Arrowverse shows who I actually did enjoy seeing the most, and wouldn't necessarily have been annoyed at seeing more of them on their respective shows, or even in their own spin-offs. Just a note here that no villains will be included in this list, as they probably deserve a list all of their own. With that being said, I do just want to give special shout outs to Malcolm Merlyn and Eobard Thawne as favourite characters generally, because they did tend to pop up regularly across the Arrowverse and not always in a typical villainous role. However, I didn't want to include them in this list as they can't really be identified as side characters in the same way as the rest. So, now that's all out of the way, let's do this. Let's start off with the show that kicked off the Arrowverse, Arrow. To be honest, Arrow was never my favourite show in the Arrowverse, but I enjoyed it for what it was, and I did have some love for some of the side characters, including the top 5 I'm going to mention here. So we'll start off with what may be a controversial pick. In 5th place for me is Mia Smoke / Mia Queen. I won't say much for this one, as I know a lot of people didn't like Mia, or at least her inclusion into Arrow, and I'll admit that I also have pretty big problems with all of the flash forwards in the later seasons of Arrow. Having said that though, Mia is a character I really liked. She was feisty and brave, and I do think that bringing her into the show perhaps would have worked better had she been Mia Dearden, also known as Speedy, but of course they'd already set up Mia Queen as Speedy from the very pilot episode of the show, so I get why that couldn't necessarily happen. But overall, I liked Mia. I just don't like the flash forwards in shows, especially in shows like this, where it kind of suggests that the actions of the current heroes mean nothing if their city is still crime-ridden 2 to 3 decades in the future. At number 4, we have Dr. Raymond Palmer. When Ray was first introduced into Arrow Season 3, I can't say that I was a huge fan of his character. To be honest, I found him kind of antagonistic, which I suppose was kind of the point, as he did date Felicity for a time. But as we got further into the season, and certainly by the time he crossed over into The Flash, I loved Ray. Ray's an intelligent, good guy, and he's such a sweetie. He's impossible not to love. I liked him as the Atom, and I wanted to see more of him, so I was very glad when he left Arrow to become a series regular on Legends of Tomorrow. Next up, at number 3, is Mari McCabe, aka Vixen. So she showed up in the 15th episode of Season 4 of Arrow to help Oliver against Damien Dark during their much maligned Magic season, but that was her only live action appearance. This particular iteration of the character was the lead in the animated Vixen Arrowverse tie-in series, which was then recut into an animated movie, but this isn't enough for me. The concept of Vixen's power set is intriguing to me, and Mari's own story could have been enough to carry an entire spin-off of her own, in my opinion. I feel like the Arrowverse missed several opportunities for short, limited seasons for individual heroes, just to tie into the larger Arrowverse and make it a bigger universe as a whole. And I personally think that Mari would have been an excellent contender for a live-action limited series of her own. In my number 2 slot is the sorcerer John Constantine. Now, I know that Constantine did become a series regular on Legends of Tomorrow, and before he was on Arrow, he did have a show of his own on NBC, but that was unceremoniously cancelled halfway through the first season. When it comes to the Arrowverse, Constantine made his proper debut in Arrow's 4th season. Constantine is a bit of a shit, to be honest, and that makes for truly fun dynamics with the other characters. And of course, his power set makes for great visuals. I really enjoyed the Constantine show, and I have to say that Matt Ryan plays the part so well, and I just really wanted to see more of him. As wonderful as it was to see him pop up on Arrow and Legends, before becoming a regular on Legends, I much rather would have preferred that he just have his own show. if I'm honest, I never really thought the more magical aspects of the DC universe really fit in all too well with the other shows in the Arrowverse. And where Arrow generally dealt with more human threats, Flash dealt with meta-human threats, Supergirl dealt with alien threats, etc. I just feel like a show centred more solely around the magical aspects of DC should have worked. Maybe if it wasn't on NBC, the Constantine show would have continued, but we don't know. Either way, Constantine as a character was fabulous enough to make this list. And in my top slot for my favourite side characters in Arrow, we have Nyssa Al Ghul. While I did like Talia in Arrow, I have to say that Nyssa was clearly the standout of the Al Ghuls, and I just love her to bits. We must protect Nyssa at all costs. Nyssa was a badass woman and just really fun to watch on screen. Her relationship with Sarah Lance was probably the first time I've ever shipped a couple on TV before, and I'm still salty that the pair didn't end up together at the end. Outside of that, though, Nyssa was just such a genuine character. Her loyalty to her family, her beloved, and of course to her reluctant husband, Oliver Queen, is a testament to the goodness in her heart, despite all of the killing she does for the League of Assassins. Anyway, I wanted more of Nyssa, and I just think a limited series of her life would have been really interesting, or if she had have popped up in Legends a few times, that would have been great. But yeah, for me, Nyssa Al Ghul was my favourite side character in Arrow. On to The Flash then. The Flash is definitely the show that, if anyone asked me what's wrong with having a lot of side characters, I'd just show them a few episodes of the later seasons and they'd figure out the answer pretty quickly. For some shows, having an abundance of side characters can be an annoyance, but for The Flash, it was a plague. But having said that, there were some good ones who I definitely miss seeing on the show. Okay, so I had limited my Flash list down to 4 people, but then I remembered 2 other characters who didn't get enough love, so I'm briefly just including them here as well. So in 6th place, we have Linda Park. Introduced way back in season 1, Linda was mainly just another love interest for Barry, which I always found kind of weird considering in the comics she's the mother of Wally West's children, but hey, the Flash show used a lot of Wally's villains, so why not his lover too? Just wanted to mention Linda because I still believe Iris should have had a life and friends outside of Barry and Team Flash, and Linda at CCPN would have been a great fit for that. Linda was fun and smart, and I wanted to see her journalism career grow alongside Iris's. But alas, it was not meant to be, and at some point during season 2, Linda was sadly never to be seen again. In 5th place, I have another love interest, and coincidentally another character who disappeared midway through season 2, this time in the form of Patty Spivot. Now, Patty was a genuinely great character to me, and I wish we had have seen more of her. I don't have too much to say on her right now, as I said most of my feelings on Patty in my last video, but I wanted to give her the mention here because her character was done dirty on this show, and I just wish that she'd have been brought back as a CSI in a later season. So at number 4, I have another choice that may be a little bit controversial, but this is my opinion and we're all allowed our own opinions. In the 4th slot for me is Camilla. Now, Camilla was an original character introduced in season 5 of The Flash to be Cisco's love interest. As such, she hasn't really got much of a story offered in the show, other than that she's a photographer. But the thing is, when we did see Camilla, she was great, to be honest. She was always friendly and helpful, and she was always there for Cisco and for anyone else for that matter when they needed her. Look, I'm not saying this character could hold her own spin-off or anything, but I just liked her on the show, and I feel like we could have had more with her, especially as a photojournalist working with Iris had she and Cisco stayed on the show. Next up, at number 3, is Professor Stein, otherwise known as one half of the hero Firestorm. Now, this one is a bit personal to me because Professor Stein always reminded me, both in general appearance and his mannerisms, of a family member that I lost less than a decade before I started watching all of these shows. So, granted, my opinion may be a little bit biased on this one. Regardless, though, I still found the Professor very fun to watch. He could be quite prickly at times, but he had a heart of pure gold underneath that, and that became more visible every time he showed up. Had it not been for his joining the Legends, and of course the multiverse full of Welleses, I would have loved to see Professor Stein remain as a regular on Team Flash as the new senior man of science on the team. As it stands, the Professor and Jax, his other half of Firestorm, the second iteration, departed halfway through season 2 of The Flash to go and explore time and space on the Wave Rider. And other than his eventual ending on Crisis on Earth X, which I'm still deeply upset by, I'm quite happy with how his story developed. I just wish that he hadn't been able to retire happily with Clarissa, Lily, and his new baby grandson, instead of being shot to death by Nazis while saving the world. R.I.P. Professor Stein. In my second slot for the Flash side characters, we have Julian. No, not that one, though that is what I think of every time I hear the name. But no, this Julian is none other than our metahuman specialist CSI, Julian Albert Desmond. Julian was initially introduced into season 3 in a more antagonistic role for Barry, and was later revealed to be the villainous Dr. Alchemy, though he himself was unaware of that. After that, he worked with Team Flash against Savitar, and he was in the future that Barry visited in season 3, looking after an imprisoned Killer Frost. I thought Julian was a great addition to Team Flash by the latter half of the season, and I loved his genuine enthusiasm, as well as his Indiana Jones style, when visiting Felicity on Earth 2. All I have to say really is that I was left unsatisfied by the throwaway line explaining his disappearance in season 4, and I wish he could have returned in season 5 or 6. With Julian and Patty, we could have had a great CSI team for Barry, but no, the writers just wanted to forget that Barry even has a J job. Whatever. And in my top spot for my favourite side characters on The Flash is the Flash. No, I'm just kidding. Sort of. Anyway, my real favourite side character for The Flash is, has, and always will be the one and only Dr. Harry Wells. In the whole multiverse of Welleses, Harry always stood out to me as the best of them all. To be clear, I'm not including Eobard Thawne in this, as he is not a Wells, he is a Thawne dressed as a Wells. Also, if I were to include Eobard, he'd obviously have the top spot on this list. Anyway, Harry was introduced as the main Wells of season 2, and I did love the character then, but it wasn't until season 4 that I feel his presence was absolutely perfect. And that's only because by season 4, he was already a friend of everyone on Team Flash, and so the dynamics between the teammates were just so much better. Harry is the most prickly of all the Welleses, but he has so much heart, and his relationship with Cisco in particular is comedy gold. I will always love Harry, and I will forever be pissed that Barry sacrificed Harry, along with every other Wells in the cosmos, for 10 minutes of super speed before destroying the very thing that Harry and all the others died for. And really, after all the many times Barry changed time, the writers could easily have found some convoluted way of bringing him back to life, and no one would have questioned it, because we all would have been distracted by the pure joy of seeing Harry again. Come on, they could have saved Harry. So, Supergirl was the first show which I personally noticed had a lot of episodes dedicated more to the side characters, and never was that more evident than in the first half of the final season. But I digress. This was never a show that I ever had a strong love for, and to be honest, I only continued watching it because it was a part of the Arrowverse, and I have this incessant need to know a full story and how everything ends. Despite this, Supergirl definitely had some standout side characters for me, and here they are. In 5th place, we have Lena Luthor. Now, I'm someone who actually really enjoyed Jon Cryer's version of Lex Luthor, at least at the start of his run in the role, but Little Sister Lena was a definite standout for me. I always loved the really intelligent characters on any show, and Lena is no different. I really liked watching her friendship with Kara grow and how good a person she was despite the family she grew up with. Her character went so far downhill in my opinion after Lex told her that Supergirl was secretly her bestie, and she turned all villainous rather than just being a grown-up and talking to Kara about it. I also hated her whole witchcraft storyline, but that's purely just because of my hatred of shows where absolutely every character has to have some kind of powers or supernatural abilities by the end. But either way, I like Lena for the most part, just not necessarily the storylines she was given. In 4th place is Win Shot. Again, I have to be honest here, I didn't actually like Win all that much at the start, but that's because he was clearly just there to be part of a love triangle for Kara, despite her clearly having no romantic interest in him. That sort of storyline just annoys me in TV shows. But as far as Win's character goes, he is sweet and lovable and a perfect guy in the chair for Kara. When he left the show, I was upset, and I really was happy to see his brief return in the later season, so that shows that he is a favourite side character for me. In third place is Cat Grant. Unfortunately, Cat was only in the show properly for a single season, but the time we had with her was great. Cat was a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it, and she would not take any nonsense from anyone. Cat was one of the few characters in the Arrowverse who actually figured out the identity of their show's hero very early on, and even though Kara denied it and Cat went along with that, it is made very clear that she always did know the truth and she was prepared to go along with the charade of not knowing for Kara's sake. I just really wish we had have had a chance to see more of Cat Grant in Supergirl, because I really did enjoy any scene that she was in. In second place is John Johns, also known as the Martian Manhunter. John started out as fairly antagonistic in nature, but he was quickly shown to be a good guy at heart and was secretly a green Martian who had pledged to watch out for the Danvers sisters. Due to his painful backstory, scenes with John often had an emotional weight to them, and his character often felt like a father figure in a way to Kara and Alex. I would have liked to see much more of John in his true alien form, and I do think that a Martian Manhunter spin-off would have been terrific to see, if budget wasn't an issue, of course. And in the top spot for my favourite Supergirl side characters is Nia Null, aka Dreamer. Nia was another original character for the Arrowverse, though she was based off of another character from far in the future, who is her descendant on the show. Nia was a great addition to the show, and I liked her character from the off. Her storyline is so intriguing, with her believing that she has narcolepsy and then discovering she has her family's dream powers and then becoming the hero Dreamer. She had an interesting and fleshed out backstory, and her relationship with Brainy was very shippable. If I had to choose between a show about Supergirl or a show about Dreamer, I think I would actually pick a show about Nia, and not just because Supergirl in the show isn't anything like the Supergirl from the comics, which actually would have provided a much more interesting show in my opinion, but because Nia is a fascinating character with a really great power set, and I would have just loved a spin-off based on Dreamer. Now on to my favourite Arrowverse show, Legends of Tomorrow. This one was really hard for me to choose favourites because Legends is a team show, so there aren't really all that many actual side characters. So all of my choices are technically all Legends, but they either felt like side characters, or for a time they were, or they were replaced, or something like that. Whatever, here's my picks. In at number 5, we have Mick Rory, aka Heatwave. Mick is one of the original Legends to join the Wave Rider crew back in season 1, and I have loved him since season 2. Mick was a villain on The Flash before joining the Wave Rider with his partner in crime, Captain Cold, and until season 2, he really did feel more like a side character to Leonard Snart, as opposed to his own character. Once season 2 started, however, he was on his own, dealing with his best friend's sacrifice, and that's when this character really started to change, in my opinion, and I grew to love him. Mick often had the funny one-liners and was much smarter than anyone ever gave him credit for. He was also actually a terrific leader when he was forced to be. I was really sad when he left the Legends, but overall I was quite happy with his send-off. At number 4 is another Vixen, Amaya Jiwei. When Amaya was introduced back in season 2, she did seem like she was a side character, as she was part of the JSA in the 1940s. But after her boyfriend Rex Tyler was killed by Eobard Thawne, she joined the Legends for their finest season ever. Amaya had a firm grasp of right and wrong, and she was often the voice of reason among the Legends when they bickered, as well as being a friend to Mick when he needed one the most. I always knew that Amaya wouldn't, or at least shouldn't, remain with the Legends for long, as she was from the past and very much had a future to ensure. If she didn't return to her own time, then the Vixen that we saw featured on Arrow wouldn't be born. This knowledge always made seeing her quite bittersweet, especially as her relationship with Nate grew, but I loved all the time that we did have with her character. In third place is Gideon. The AI of the Wave Rider was there from the very start, though she was never considered to be a legend herself until she actually received a fully human form in the final season. Gideon was quirky and lovable, just like the rest of the team, and her sarcastic comments were always fun to hear. I'm really glad that the actor for Gideon always did manage to show up in human form at least once per season, whether it be in Rip's mind, or Gary's mind, or alternate timelines, or actually in a real physical human body. But even when we could only hear her voice, she was an absolute treat on this show. And what a voice! In the final season, Amy Louise Pemberton showed off her beautiful singing voice, and I honestly downloaded that song as soon as I could. It was just wonderful. Anyway, Gideon is my third favourite side character on Legends, and I'm glad that she was a part of the Legends team the whole way through the show. In second place is Zari Tomaz, also known as Zari 1.0. This particular Zari feels like a side character because she was replaced by another version of herself 2 seasons into her time on the show. Personally, as lovely as Zari 2.0 is, the first iteration of the character is my favourite of the pair, and I'm really glad that they didn't kill her off completely, instead choosing to have her stuck in the totem realm. Although that does still upset me because I just loved her relationship with Nate, and now that's 2 loves that he's lost due to timeline shenanigans. Zari was such a great addition to the Legends, as she was from a few decades in the future, and she gave the Legends a bit of an update and brought knowledge from her own time, including her incredible techno skills. Her love of donuts and her straight-faced humour leaves fond memories in my mind, and this version of Zari is also the main focus of my favourite episode of Legends, the 11th episode of Season 3, when she is stuck in a time loop and lives the same day over and over again, allowing for fun scenes and for Zari to really feel like a member of the team. And that ship goes boom scene will always be one of my favourite scenes in the Arrowverse. Okay, so I was really tempted to do a joke here and say Bebo in the top spot, but I shall refrain. In the first place of this list is a character I honestly never thought I would actually like, but I ended up loving her. It's Nora Dark. Nora started off as a villain back in season 3 and was a recurring character after that. I think that the reason I like Nora so much is mostly due to her storyline with Ray, as I felt the 2 characters really had something special. I suppose that's because the actors are married in real life, but either way, their chemistry really comes across, and I just want them to be happy. Ray and Nora started getting close in season 3, but never really went anywhere until the next season, when Nora was imprisoned by the Time Bureau. But you did see a love growing between them, and their relationship is just so sweet and pure and wonderful. Nora has a tragic backstory, but she does have a very happy future with Ray, and that wedding episode was just so beautiful, and for the beginning part, quite funny as well, when Damien Dark returned and Nora lied that she was marrying Constantine. Chaos ensued, as it always does for the Legends. But Damien, despite all his faults, is actually a great dad by the end of season 3, and that is no different in the wedding episode, when he gives Nora away to her happy future, and ensures that Ray looks after her as she deserves. Out of all the characters on Legends of Tomorrow, I do think that Nora Dark had the biggest character development and story arc, going from villain to reluctant fairy godmother to being truly happy with her life. And I was so sad when Ray and Nora left Legends, although we know that that wasn't necessarily the actors' decisions. But I'm happy with how Nora's story ended. But really, when are we going to get an Atom Fairy Godmother spin-off? So I'm of the relative minority here because I actually enjoyed the Batwoman show quite a bit. Was it perfect? No, of course not. But no Arrowverse show actually is. I liked Batwoman even with the rocky start to season 2, and I would have liked to see a 4th season, but it just wasn't meant to be. Regarding side characters, I couldn't actually think of many that stood out to me as favourites, to be honest, so I only have 2 to offer for this show. And not because I didn't like any other characters, just because I didn't like them enough to consider them my favourites. So, in second place is Beth Kane, also known as Alice. Now, I know I said I wasn't doing villains, but Alice wasn't technically the villain for seasons 2 and 3, and she was just there as a side character, so I feel fine to include her on this list. Beth's backstory is tragic to say the least, and she grew up a fighter because she had to. Even when she was a villain in season 1, she was still reluctant to hurt or kill her sister Kate, and I honestly think that shows strength on her part after all that she went through. Honestly, after Ruby Rose left as Kate Kane, I think I would have preferred the show to centre more on Beth as she searches for her sister. They did have Wallace Day come in as Kate later on in season 2, but she had left again by the end of the season. Look, I like Ryan Wilde as a character, I do, but I think that Beth's story had so much more potential and heart to it, and links to the other characters still remaining in the show after Ruby's departure. And that's clear from her reaction to discovering that the woman she believed to be Black Mask's daughter was actually Kate Kane. Rachel Scarston is a tremendous actress, and she really brings Beth's pain to the surface, while simultaneously showing just how well Alice is at hiding that pain behind a smile and a knife, usually. I just have to say that Alice was a great character, and I loved seeing her redemption arc across seasons 2 and 3 until she eventually seems to give up being Alice in favour of returning to her old life as Beth by the end of season 3. I love a psychological thriller, and I think that they really could have leaned more into that aspect had the show have been centred around Beth and her redemption arc as she healed from her childhood torment. And maybe they could have brought in a recast for Kate Kane, who would have helped her through the healing process after they reunite later in season 2. Personally, I would have just had Sophie or Julia picking up the Batwoman mantle on a temporary basis during that time until Kate returned, but I do like Ryan. I just would have liked Beth to have more of a link to the main story if she was going to stick around as a series regular for the whole show's run. My ultimate favourite side character for Batwoman, however, is the marvellous Mary Hamilton. I have loved Mary since day one, and she is just so sweet and must be protected at all costs. Mary is the medical expert on the Bat team, and she runs a free clinic in the poorer part of her neighbourhood, which immediately gets her a big thumbs up. Mary's tenacity in keeping her clinic alive is inspiring, especially as she's studying to complete her qualifications at the same time. She is courageous and kind, and she really didn't deserve to watch her mother die right before her very eyes. I wasn't really a fan of Mary's villainous arc in season 3, even though her whole look and costume was just gorgeous. I know other people liked it, but I just don't feel it was warranted. I don't think it was built up enough for her to switch like that. I just wish they had have offered more of a reasoning behind her sudden turn to villainy, because I just wasn't buying the reasons they did give. Either way, Mary Hamilton has cemented her place as my favourite Batwoman character. Some of my favourite side characters couldn't really be fit into an individual show, as they only appeared in a crossover or they appeared in too many shows across the Arrowverse to narrow down to a single list. So here's my top 3 other side characters. First up is Leo Snart. Introduced in Crisis on Earth X, Leo Snart, aka Commander Cold, was the good guy version of Earth 1's Captain Cold. He was instrumental in the fight against the Nazis on Earth X, and also joined Team Flash for another fight later down the line. There's not really too much to say on Leo, but I just really enjoyed his scenes and wanted to include him on this list. In second place is John Wesley Shipp. I didn't really know how else to include these characters, so they're all being included under the banner of the man who played them. Henry Allen, Earth 90 Flash, and of course Jay Garrick all had significant impact on the Arrowverse as a whole, as well as individual shows, and I just love them all. John is a tremendous actor, and he just brought these characters to life, and I'm including them all on this list. And finally, in the top spot for crossover side characters is Earth 96's Superman. I have not yet seen, at the time of recording this, any of the older Superman films, including Superman Returns with Brandon Routh. But I have to say, Brandon makes an incredible Superman, and I absolutely loved this particular version of the character in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That Supes versus Supes fight was fantastic, and I really liked that this Superman was a paragon, though I hated that Lex killed him off to be the paragon himself. Damn you, Lex, you took this Superman away from us. Anyway, this version of Clark Kent earns the top spot for me of my favourite crossover side characters. And just while we're speaking of Crisis on Infinite Earths, though, The show Lucifer was brought into the realm of the Arrowverse through this crossover, so I'm just briefly going to touch upon some honourable mentions from that show, because Lucifer honestly has the most amazing side characters. Mazakine, Eve, and Ella are precious, and I love them, and they all deserve the world. Maze is just so badass, and I love her to bits. Eve is adorable and deserved way better than she got, and I hope that she and Maze will be very, very happy in their fictional future. And Ella is probably my favourite side character on Lucifer. She's just amazing. I love her. She's so funny and sweet and lovely. So I just wanted to include those characters on this list, just as honourable mentions. So that's my list of my favourite side characters in the Arrowverse. Each of the shows had their ups and downs, but overall, the Arrowverse has cemented itself in DCTV history, and it is pretty unlikely that such a connected TV universe of this scale will be on our screens ever again, let alone anytime soon. For some shows, there was definitely too much focus on the side characters, where in others, I don't really feel like there was enough. But that's my list. Let me know in the comments who your favourite side characters in the Arrowverse are. And thanks for watching.